Amen. How's everyone doing?
Great.
6 months ago when I was with you, I asked you all how you liked that 61-yard field goal, and I got booed. I got booed. And I got booed again. And people say, act like you've been there before, but we've never been there before. We don't even know what to do. We're running through the streets of Philadelphia, hugging strangers, and I'm like, can we just get back to being disinterested and skeptical of each other? Because that's the city that I was sent on mission to. This weird love is just not going for me. It's great to be with you. I'm the last session, so lower your expectations. All right? Hey, thanks. Yes. I want to, before we get started in the content, isn't that a really cool name that I came up for this? Discipleship Environment Matrix. I like that. I don't exactly know what that means, but we'll figure it out today. I want to put some, like Omar just said, connecting some dots. I hope that you're connecting the dots from the weekend that we started with this idea of the mission of God. We worked through a tool of up, in, and out. We've talked about the discipleship square and persons of peace. And oftentimes you hear all these different things and your head's kind of swirling. You're like, how do I do this? How do I plug these in? And I hope that they're starting to connect. And here's my encouragement for you. It's kind of like you're learning a new language, a discipleship language. And that's how you create culture. Language creates a culture. So to develop a discipleship culture, you kind of have to learn a new language. So if you go into your social spaces and it feels like you don't know how to say or define a word, it's okay. That's what that space is for, that learning, to start to connect these dots. And here's some really good news. That's what the coaching's for. As we get on those calls every couple of weeks and walk through this, you start to learn a new language. So today, we're going to introduce our last kind of way to look at something, and that's this invitation and challenge matrix or quadrant or grid. And this kind of looks at what is the environment in which discipleship happens? What are some of the qualities and characteristics of the conversations that happen? If you think about any person who's ever taught you anything, a parent, a teacher, whatever the subject was, learning how to cook, how to drive a car, there seems to be a couple of things that good teachers, good leaders have, at least two things. One would be that he or she welcomes you into relationship to learn about their knowledge, to share with you. They share more than just hey, here's a couple of bullet points, memorize those, and then repeat them on the test. But they get you caught up in their story, their joy, their excitement for what it is that they're teaching you. Have you experienced that? Am I just making something up that no one else has experienced? All right, cool. The second thing is that person often called you to be more than you thought you were capable of. They gave you opportunity to step off the cliff, kind of. I mean, I've had countless basketball coaches that were like that, and a whole bunch of them that weren't. And I remember being changed by one individual who took the time with me as a little boy to work after the practice with me, because he knew I was passionate about playing, but I wasn't a great athlete. I thought I was, but my mom told me I wasn't too. She said, Gino, she did. She said, Gino, my younger brother, he's the better athlete. She told me that when I was young. She said, you really should stick to just studying because your brother, he's the natural athlete. That's what a 14-year-old boy wants to hear. So I haven't talked to my mom in 30 years. Just kidding. That's not true. That's not true. But the best teacher, probably the best teacher, is Jesus, not even probably. And I want to show you something that he taught people, how he walked into this idea of invitation. I'm a rookie at this. We meet around a table in our church, so I don't have any electronics. I just pass the butter. Right before, so in Matthew 16, right before this passage, let's set the stage. Jesus is asked, who do the people say that I am? Who do you say that I am, Peter? Peter says, you're the Christ, the Son of God. And here's Jesus' invitation right here. Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. What an invitation. It reminds me a lot of the invitation that God gave to Abram, that the nations will be blessed through you. The church will be built through you. That's the invitation to come and be a part of what Jesus is doing and going to do through Peter. And then we move down just a few verses, and Peter is Peter, just like me. It's pretty awesome. That was too fast. Sorry, guys. Can you go back one for me? Too much butter. We'll start over. How about them Eagles? Are you doing it? I'll leave my hands off, all right. Cool. Thanks. You can pull up the passage. So Jesus, the setting this right before it, Jesus tells of his coming crucifixion. And he also says that he's going to rise 3 days later. And Peter tells him, well, that's not going to happen on my watch. You're like, man. So here's the challenge portion of this interaction. Get behind me, Satan. That's what Jesus says to Peter. That's a high challenge. You are a hindrance to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. Then Jesus told his disciples, if that wasn't challenge enough, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whomever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Jesus is like the master at inviting people into sharing life and then challenging them to something more. And I feel like that would be a very clear definition of this idea of invitation and challenge. The invitation to be with him. That, as a leader, that's what he's giving you. But he's also challenging you to be more than you are. To take opportunity, he gives you opportunity to lead. So as leaders, as people that are discipling, there's this matrix that we can look at and say, what does it look like to have high invitation and high challenge like Jesus? Now you have this in your notes, this quadrant, but we're going to talk a little bit about each one as we go through here. So you can see that there's on one end a high invitation, another on a low invitation, high challenge, low challenge, which would cause a kind of each quadrant to have a certain behavior. Let's talk about the first one here. When you have low challenge and low invitation, you're not invited into life together or into experiencing and learning more, and you're not challenged to do anything more, that is a boring culture. I remember being part of a boring culture. Right about the time that my mom told me my sports career was over, I got a job working on a fruit truck. You can laugh, it's cool, I'm all right with it. A fruit truck, Bob's Fruit Truck on Highway 12 out in Santa Rosa, California. My job was to take from the coolers all the fruit and put them on the truck and then sell the fruit. Hang out on the side of the road and sell the fruit. He paid me pretty well, but he never let me try any of the fruit. So I didn't know what I was selling, except I'm craftier than the average fruit truck operator. I would accidentally let fruit spill, because anything that was bruised, I could throw it away or I could eat it. So I had a ton of fruit that summer because I wanted to learn, and then I found that I could sell it better when I knew what this peach tasted like and the difference between that and another one. But at the time, I didn't realize that Bob wasn't really inviting me into learning about this or challenging me to do it. It was just something I was naturally doing. And quickly, I outgrew wanting to work for Bob's Fruit Truck. And I left because it was too boring of a job. Have you ever had an experience like that? Are you thinking about those people that didn't lead you right now? Because you should repent, because that's not, I mean, Bob's a great man. I love him. Still in communication with him 30 some odd years later. Facebook's amazing that way, right? But that is not the culture that we want to see created in our churches and our missional communities, one where no one's invited to participate and no one is challenged to be more. But honestly, that's pretty common, that's the case in church situations. People come in and out, no one recognizes them or acknowledges them, no one invites them to anything, and they leave. And that culture is one that's dying. That's what it produces, is death. Boredom leads to death. That was another thing my mom told me, by the way. When I'd say, Mom, I'm bored, she's like, people who say they're bored are boring. And you're going to not do well with that. So my mom always had some really good words of wisdom for me. Any thoughts or questions about this? I'm totally fine with like feedback and dialogue. Remember, we meet around a table, so it's not just one person talking. Oops, sorry, that was not good. Any other thoughts, comments?
I like it.
You like it? All right, good. So let's talk about when you have high invitation but low challenge. And you understand what I mean by that when I'm saying these words? Because remember, I started by saying this is learning a new language. So we're just going to start processing it, and we're going to develop not only language that we can use with each other, but that you can use with the people that are in your communities. So then this spreads. These concepts spread, and then this movement spreads. Yes?
Just to help understand the language, what would be like an example of a leader who offers high invitation into relationship versus a leader who offers low invitation?
Yeah, well, I think as we work through this, I'll give you more examples, but I was hoping that one with Jesus would help, but I don't know, currently? Yeah, I can share with invitation, it's just basically inviting someone into your life. Like you asked the question yesterday about how do you do this one-on-one kind of a thing, what does it look like? And my response was, well, it's life together. You invite someone in. It's not a list of things that people need to learn. It's a life that they get to imitate and walk with. So someone who's high invitation is inviting someone to move in with them, not literally, but in life. So I can think of one example, like my wife, we have a lot of kids, 4 of them, and she didn't have a lot of margin to meet with people. So you know what she did? She invited these people to go to the grocery store with her. And our 4 kids, by the way. She'd see people in the grocery store with the 4 kids, and they're like, what are you doing? She's like, well, I'm discipling my kids. And also this lady here, too. And so that's a high invitation. Like all that I have, you're open to. And someone who doesn't invite you into that is a low invitation. Does that help? Yes. Great question. So let's talk a little bit about high invitation, but no challenge, or very low challenge. That's pretty cozy, right? All that I'm about, you can be a part of, and I'm never going to question anything you do or call you to do anymore. I had a hard time coming up with examples of that, because just with my personality, one, that's just not me. So I'm like high challenge all the time. And the other thing is that because of that personality, I don't really like cozy culture. I don't hang out there very often. I'm not saying that as prideful. I'm just like, I really don't think I can come up with a situation that I've been in for very long where it's just been, oh, we're going to hang out forever and not be challenged. It's kind of like community for the sake of community. Well, that works as long as it's serving you. And as soon as someone offends you, you're out, right? That's not community. Anyone have any ideas or thoughts about that? Like maybe an example? Yeah.
Like our sowing one from the last talk. Mm-hmm. So people that don't believe what we believe, they belong before they believe. Mm. So they're invited in. The invitation's high. It's something fun, a party, whatever.
Right.
They can come out, but we're not going to get into the spiritual conversation yet.
Sure. That could be a step on the way, but I think what that is really is that's just understanding how to manage invitation and challenge, because you're intentionally not challenging them beyond what you think is appropriate. And here's an example of that. it's probably wise to just invite someone over to meet your friends rather than challenge them to study the scriptures with you when you just met them, right? That's not necessarily cozy, because honestly, that invitation to come over and meet your friends might be a high challenge for them. And that might be you walking out high invitation, high challenge in that sense. But I get what you're saying, and I think it's a good starting place to think. Yep.
I think an example of that is people who want, like a small group where it's very comfortable. If you don't go out, you don't have to do out nights. You just hang out together with your family and your kids, and you don't invite any other families into it. It's like these 6 families forever.
Yeah, I've coached some leaders that say we're gonna transition to missional communities. That's great. You just made me think of this. We're gonna transition to missional communities. We've got 7 small groups that I think all could be missional communities. I'm like, cool. So we're talking, and what we find out is like these 7 small groups have been meeting since Jesus was crucified. I mean, seriously, like all this time together, and you start using the language of multiplication, and they're like, "Get behind me, Satan." Or like, whoa, yeah, so you realize like we're not challenging them, we just want to be comfortable. That's an excellent point. Any other thoughts that are percolating? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, over here first, and then you, Ben.
This is the downside of the seeker-sensitive worship service.
Ooh.
We want everybody to come to our church to come and worship there, but we don't give them a challenge to take steps of discipleship.
Yeah.
So we have all these people who don't want to do anything.
Yeah. So I have a friend who's another church planter in Philly that I've got the opportunity to coach a little bit, and his background is like very much preach the gospel at all times. I mean, there's good in that, but without an understanding of invitation and challenge, it can be really tough. So he got the opportunity to just host community dinners in a public space. This guy offered him the use of it, and he had like 20 or 30 people coming to these monthly dinners. And he told me after 2 of them, he said, I just don't feel like I'm doing anything positive here. I'm just creating a cozy environment where I need to start preaching the gospel, or I'm not being faithful. And my response, because I'm thinking through proper use of invitation challenge, was, please don't do that. And he's like, what? I'm like, oh, this is when they call me a heretic. I'm ready. I'm ready. I said, because what you're going to do is you're just going to perpetuate what they expect. You invited them to dinner, and you're a church guy, and then as soon as you start doing that, they're like, oh, there it is. I've been waiting for this bait and switch. And the whole time, you make my life harder, because we live in the same city, and I'm going to hear those stories of, I don't want anything to do with that. I said, would it be possible for you to just love them, and then invite them to something more, where you can elevate the challenge, because it's the appropriate environment? And that, you're right. So the seeker-sensitive part of the problem is, we don't have another environment to challenge them in. And so we don't. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, like having a book study and then not doing anything with it.
Yeah.
Like if we wanted to go through a series, wanted to go through a book of the Bible, and then just leaving it at that.
Yeah. Yeah. So those situations, that's where I'm the high challenge guy too. It's like people say, can we study another book or something? And I'm like, no, we're all studied out. We're like, our knowledge has way outpaced our obedience. And that, you're right. Let's just study another book. We'll feel comfortable about checking off that box. We learned something new, but we never applied it. That's a great point. Yeah.
Gino, I think about Billy Graham and how he always had a high invitation, but then people just didn't follow up. There was, he told them this, here's the, but there was really no follow up, because I went forward at the Billy Graham crusade when I was a youngster, but it took many years to percolate in me, but it eventually did.
Well, at a lot of those crusades, not having ever been to one, but I know that they had people on the side that were connected to churches that tried to bring more of another invitation where the challenge could be. But I think you're right. There's not as much value in just an invitation without a challenge. And I think we're all kind of processing this and going, all right, let's talk about what the high invitation, high challenge looks like, right? Right? Okay. No? All right. Because we're not going to yet. We have another quadrant. I just want to know if you're still interested. High challenge, low invitation. So let's think about this. This is, if we're just kind of making up a scenario, this is someone who, or a community that asks you to change, but doesn't invite you into life together. I think that sounds a lot like you stink, change, and you're on your own. Figure it out. Maybe no one actually says that, right? It's probably not what they say, but I think that's how we feel. Now, I've been in those communities. I hope that I haven't led those, but I probably have. But this is how we learn to calibrate this invitation and challenge together. But that's a situation where, here might be an example, where there's always a call to be a part of something, to do something, whether it's work that's on mission with people or programs that you've got to pull off because that's what the church is designed to do. But either way, there's like this high amount of stuff to get done, but no one is walking with you to just care for you. So even if you're in a situation right now where there's a lot of programs, I was part of a church plant for 3 years, and this isn't even anything compared to others. We had to do the setup and tear down. You know, I've heard the stories, well, you think that's a lot. Let me tell you about my 15-year tale of setting up and tearing down, you know. And it's true, right? I mean, you guys had to do it for a long time. You got the building, right? Yeah? Okay. So, but I actually got roped into somehow leading that. And I found out that no one wanted to do it. That was shocking to me. Yeah, right. But part of the reason no one wanted to do it is because they weren't valued. They didn't see this as ministry or an opportunity to serve. And we slowly tried to raise the challenge, say, like, instead of setting up the chairs, what if we were praying for the people who would sit in those chairs? Like, I'm going to raise the challenge for you a little bit. And we ended up having like this community that formed of the setup and teardown team, to the point where sometimes I would like go over to the building the night before and set up by myself because I knew those guys just needed to sleep in, or they'd do the same for me because something was going on in their family, and we were communicating like family rather than just saying, you got to be there at 6:30 to set this up. But that stress can be avoided by moving the invitation and the challenge up a little bit. Yeah.
It sounds like the high challenge, low invitation quadrant, you know, the stress culture.
Yeah.
It feels unloving, right? Can you maybe talk a little bit about how love and invitation coalesce?
Yeah, man, that's a great point. I wish I'd thought of that before. Really, I have a lot to say about that. No, that's great. I do have a lot to say about that. Because let's define love, right? I think one way to look at love is that love is not seeking your own way, right? Considering others more important than yourself, laying down your life for them in tangible ways. So maybe that would mean an invitation, or low invitation is saying, my stuff is too important to not get done, so I'm not going to slow down with other people. Because they just, I think, I don't remember, but I have a story that I tell about my boys and putting together the furniture. Did I tell you guys that 6 months ago? No. Awesome, I have a story I can share then. We bought an IKEA patio set for our small little like 6x8 backyard. That's a backyard in Philly with concrete. And so it's table, 2 chairs, and like 19 of those bent wrenches, right? They should put Band-Aids in there for the blisters that you get afterwards. Or I should buy power tools, but I'd have no room to store them in my house. They wanted to help me doing this. They're 11 and 9 now. This was a couple years ago. And my first response was like, no. This is going to be hard enough. And as I said, okay, well, there's enough bent wrenches for everyone. You can bring the neighbors over, right? Like, everyone get one, and we'll start putting it together. And they would do their best. I would show them where to do it. They'd do it, and then I'd have to take it apart and then redo it. And I was like, man, God's really working on I don't want to love them. He was like convicting of this, like me of this. I just want to get the task done. I don't want to invite them into this because it's so much easier to get it done. So the maybe 1 hour that it could have taken was like 3.5. And we had these kind of wonky chairs, and I tightened them up. And they carried them out like they were like the proudest boys ever. Like, look what we've done. And my heart like melts. And I'm like, I'm an idiot. Like, I was going to avoid that. And then I thought, like, that is so much like our Father. He calls us to this mission and gives us this mandate. And then he says, I'm giving you a bent wrench. Because honestly, you can't handle much more than that, bro. I give you a power tool and your neighborhood's going to blow up. So we're going to give you a bent wrench, but here's the joy of that. The joy isn't in the tool that you get or the work that you're doing. It's in the person you're doing it with. That we get to be in his presence and that he took time. Like Matt said, we need to slow down to get to God's speed, the N.T. Wright quote, to speed up with God or catch up with God. And so often we're moving at this pace where we're just not letting people in, we're not loving them because we're just seeing things that need to get done rather than being with people and like moving our agenda aside. It's probably way more than you were expecting or wanted with that. So
No,
does that help?
like, go back to yesterday, it sounds like the stress culture, the high challenge, low invitation, feels like a culture that's really focused on the mandate, but not the mission.
Yeah. Good point. Look at you connecting dots, man. Dig it. Yeah.
It kind of seems like this low invitation, like, only touches maybe D4, maybe D3 with this high challenge. It's like you do it and I'll watch. You show
Right.
me how to do it.
Right.
I told you how to do it.
Right.
And then the low challenge just like kind of falls off after like D1 or D2. And just like, all right, yeah, you can help. You know, but do it.
Right.
Do it all. You just sit there and watch.
Right. Right. And even that, like think about the stress that it causes someone when you're being told, you do it and I'll watch, but I've never invited you into learning the how I come to do this. There's a guy that's pastor in Atlanta now, or Atlanta area, Dave Rhodes, who taught the first immersions that we did, the first go around, and he said something back then that stuck with me since then. He said, when you do something that you're gifted at, you're like a D4 in, you know, and other people see it, but you don't slow down to enter in with them so that they can see like how that happens. You can't reproduce it. You look like a magician who's performing tricks that no one knows how you did. And they go, it'd be awesome if I could be like Dave, you know, but I can't, so I'm not going to. And then if Dave were to come back, I don't want to pick on Dave, if I were to come back and say, do it, I'm watching, that's like, do it, I'm watching you. It's not good. So I love that you're piecing that together. Any other thoughts or questions before I try to use this thing? Yeah?
I just really think that the high challenge, low invitation has a lot to do with us wanting to look like we're the only ones that
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes we like to be the magician.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We're doing these things and other people wonder at how in the world we can do that. But I love that you put stress culture there because the stress is on us to be able to keep doing those tricks, which have to get better and better and better.
Yeah.
We can't maintain that.
That's a great observation because it's stressful not just for the ones that are not receiving the invitation, but for those who are performing. And it's great. I love that this is what's happening from this because we're giving you a tool. And, you know, I don't know, sometimes I feel like I should say this just so you guys remember, like we have these sessions that are 30, 45 minutes. We can't say everything that we'd want to or know about it. And I love when you guys are saying the things that we've kind of observed because that's where we go in coaching, is we start saying, that's not a pushback on you, that's a compliment, like saying you're putting this together. You guys are all doing that. And to see that observation is to really drill into the heart of this and why it's helpful. It's not just so I can look at this and categorize people and then blame them. It's actually so I can do some heart surgery on myself as a leader. That's great. So let's talk a little bit about high invitation, high challenge, and what that might look like. Well, I think, as I've said, Jesus is the example. He's also the one who gives us the power to walk in that too, to be people of high invitation and to challenge people. I mean, just the simple thought for me often is, what does it look like to invite people in and challenge them to something more? Not in what I think is the more for them, but what is God calling them to? And not always does it work out the way that you want it to. Just so you know that. Like you might actually be walking with a high invitation, high challenge, and then things don't go the way that you wanted them to. We had a family that actually moved to Philly to join with us, to be part of the church planting efforts. And we're really good friends with them. But as things kind of developed, we realized that they just weren't committed. They just didn't have the time. They were putting time to other things. And we're a small group of people, like, with a serious mission and calling. And it was becoming a hindrance. And there was other things that don't need to talk about now. There just were like kind of all these distractions, and I kept coming to him and talking to him and challenging him about his social media and the other things that were divisive in what he was saying, and he just pushed back. And I kept raising the challenge as I was inviting him into something that he just didn't seem to want. And ultimately, when we had the conversation, I was personally, like, if I just tell you where I was like, he doesn't respect me, he doesn't care about me. And as my brother, I just told him, like, I just don't feel like you care about me. You don't want to be with me. And I'm not trying to be a martyr or looking for pity. I'm just saying, like, if you're not happy here and you don't want to be about this, like, I want to release you to what God has for you. And he was like, no. But then, like, 6 more months of the same thing, and finally came to him. And I will tell you, it was not my best moment in leadership. It got really ugly in the conversation, because some of the accusations that came to me, I did not take very well. They were personal, they were wrong, and they were inappropriate. And I was like, I'm not having that. And we worked through it. I asked for forgiveness. He gave me that forgiveness. And then they decided that they were going to move on, because we were right. They weren't committed to this. And that hurt. But I kept going back and saying, like, would I have done something different? Would I have raised the challenge less to keep him so it would be comfortable? So no, I couldn't do that, because a year of walking that out was too much. So fast forward another year. Here's a really cool thing, is out of nowhere, he calls me up. Like, we live close, but we're not like hanging out all the time. They're connected somewhere else and doing great. And he says, it was 2 years ago that I moved into the city. And then when they moved in, they lived with us. We took their whole family in for like a month. And he says, and I don't know if I've ever really thanked you. And then when we moved out, you said, like, when we decided to leave and go on to something else, you had said that you didn't feel like I loved you or really respected you, and that maybe it was better to go somewhere else. And he says, like, this last year, every time I have a conversation with someone, my mind, I go, well, Gino taught me that. Well, Gino taught me that, or I learned that from that community or something. He's like, but if you don't think that I respect you, it's kind of like if my wife says, you don't love me. No matter how many times I think I'm saying it and doing it right, it's true, because she doesn't sense that, and there's a communication gap. So he asked for my forgiveness. And like, we're hanging out again, and they're at another community, but I can count on one hand, maybe one finger, the number of times that that's ever happened where someone's come back. And he reaffirmed this idea that I'm so glad that you challenged me to seek what God was doing in my life and what he was calling me to, that I had to leave to realize this. But I really want to be in relationship with you. So we hang out, and it's emotionally confusing. I'm not like this cold-hearted person that just challenges people and you're dead to me. I'd like to be that way. I would love to be that way. I want that part of the Italian ethic. But I don't have it. I blame my mom again, by the way. I don't need this anymore. Yeah, good. Yeah. How am I doing on time? I don't have the thing in front of me. Do I have like 5 minutes? Yeah, go. Okay. So we don't want to end on that story, right? I got 2 others. You want to hear both of them or just one? Okay, both. So during the time that we went back to New Jersey that my wife was talking about, and kind of in the healing process, like I think something that she didn't have any reason to share, but part of the healing process is to be on mission. Like, that's actually where you are discipled, is in engaging with other people and not just thinking about your own pain and hurt and like spiritual navel gazing, as you might say, right? But to do that, to get well. But we endeavored to just like start making friends with our neighbors, and some people from the church community that we were a part of said, we'd love to just see what it looks like to disciple people in the everyday, and we know that you guys have experienced that a little bit. And I was like, I'd like to do that, but I want to do it, well, and make sure that the leaders are comfortable with it. And like our lead pastor at the time, he jumped into the group with us. So I guess I got his blessing then, he's going to do life with us. And we saw some really cool stuff. God was doing some amazing things with just building relationships and this whole family that came to faith over time through this. And one of the really cool things was this other couple, this other family that was walking right with us, Paul and Eileen. And Paul, I just told him, like, from the beginning, you've got access to everything about me, and I don't want to put pressure on you, but I need you in my life. And he's like, you got it. So we would get together, we'd pray together, we would walk the streets together and pray, we have meals together, we did life together with the community and then extra individually. And over time, Paul started seeing that he wanted to lead some things, that God was calling him to reproduce this, his son was going to be playing football in like the Pee Wee League, and he wanted to enter into like coaching, and he was saying, what if we started like having intentional time with the people on the football team? I was like, that's awesome. I love that God's calling you to that. He's like, yeah, and some of the other families are going to play on the team too. Their kids are going to play, and that was fantastic. So we were all for that, and I challenged him to just lead that. After walking with him for a year, I was like, lead our community in that. Get us into this, and bring people with you, and let's make disciples of the Pittman Football League, And he's like, awesome. He was so excited about it. And he came in and he told everyone, this is what we're going to do. Like, he led this poorly, is what I'm about to tell you, okay? He told them, we are called to make disciples of this team and the league and all these people. And he had like this great vision, and it was kind of like this really, really good speech where you felt like you were going to storm out of the locker room and just conquer everything. And he ran out, like not literally, but like he ran out, and no one went with him. And I watched. And I was like, oh, this is going to hurt, And it was we'd catch up, and he said, like, no one's involved in this. No one's making time for this. And that's where the challenge kind of came up again. I said, Paul, like, you're so, you know what God's call is for you. It's so evident. You speak about it, and it's the enthusiasm pours out of you, and the certainty. But you're really not a leader if no one's following you. I mean, he's a business leader. He's a manager of a large retail and all this. Like, he does this stuff professionally. He's like, yeah, you're right. I said, what would it look like? I just want to challenge you to think about what would God ask you to do to get people to buy in, for lack of a better term. He said, well, let's pray. I was like, good. That's a good answer. That's a really good answer. I'm encouraged by you. So we prayed, and he came back to the community, and he asked for forgiveness. And he led the group. I get emotional because they saw like 5 people come to faith and get baptized in the next year, more than we saw when I was leading it. And we were able to move and be sent into the city, like leaving this in Paul and Eileen's hands and continuing the work that God started there. And he always points back to that. It's like this funny time when he's like, man, if you didn't challenge me to lead better, I would have just isolated myself from everyone. I would have come back and said, none of these people want to be on mission. When really the problem was me, that I wasn't capable of leading them. And I think that's an example of like really balancing and calibrating that invitation and challenge, and seeing that I didn't do anything other than just invite him into what God was calling him to do, and encourage him to try to do it a little bit better. And he figured it all out. God showed him the way. And it's so amazing to see things multiply because of it, that people are multiplying a culture that's one of discipleship, where it's common to speak truth to one another and challenge them into God's best for them. That's part of the goal. So now I'll tell you one last one. My friend Jay in Philly, he's a hip-hop artist and a good friend. I've known him for about a year, and he's not walking with Jesus, but he recently went through this like relationship breakup. We hang out a lot, and he calls me his spiritual advisor too. It's like we're doing something. I don't know what it is. I'm like, I think I'm getting some credit in the liner notes next month, by the way. I hope it doesn't say spiritual advisor. That'll be weird. But we got together not too long ago, and he was sharing with me. Now, understand, there's been a lot of conversations, a lot of meals together. He knows my whole family. So what I'm about to share with you might not be what God wants you to say to someone. I'm the high challenge guy. He had just gone through this breakup in a relationship, and he shares with me, the long and short of it is, he goes, I'm pretty sure that I'm just never going to be in a serious relationship. And I said, well, why do you think that? And he says, well, because I'm an artist. You know, we live this lifestyle, and, you know, just people just don't understand the stresses, and it's blah, 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 blah. And I'm looking at him going, man, I love this guy. Here it comes. I was like, I think that's BS, but I actually said the S. So I got his attention because he stopped thinking about himself. He looked at me, and he said, really? And I said, yeah, man. I said, I think you sell yourself short. I think your problem isn't your occupation. I think your problem is your heart. I said, I think the thing is that you know enough things about God to be disobedient with everything he's said to you. And he's like, what do you mean by that? I said, brother, you grew up in the church. You still attend that church that you grew up in, but you don't want anything to do with Jesus. And I would love to show you what this is so that you could get a relationship with him that might affect you, not might, but it will affect the relationships you have with others. So honestly, I'm praying against you having a relationship with any woman until you get a right relationship with Jesus. And he was like, that's dope. And I said, yes, it is. And we slowly get together and talk about that. And it's a slow process, but he's got access to my life. I'm available to him anytime. So he's come out to like our dinner church gatherings that we're doing. I don't have time to talk about that, but once a month we have a meal and invite people in the community. And he was so excited about it afterwards. He said, that was amazing. I really liked being a part of that and seeing that aspect of how you kind of communicate about Jesus, not just individually with me, but with a group of people. I said, awesome. He's like, when's the next one? He wanted to come, so I told him. And the next one came. I had talked to him that week, and he's like, I'll be there. The night came. He's not there. I'm like, well, that's kind of how it works with him, you know? And I just let it sit. And like 3 days later, I get a text message from him. I'm really sorry. Please forgive me. I'm like, man, of course. You know, are you guys okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm fine. Then the next text is this. He says, could you just do me a favor and could you text me right before and remind me? Because I'm just so busy and I forget all the time. And I'm thinking, this is how I think. I'm like, I could do that, but there'll come a day when I can't do that. And I can't be his savior now. So I called him up and I said, bro, you know me well enough. Like, I have 4 kids. We're preparing the food. Like, there's a lot on my plate. So I want you to know, but it's not just because I'm busy that I won't do this. It's because I want you to want to be there. I don't want you to be there because I invite you. And if you're not called to be there, I'm totally cool to hang out with you at other times. But I'm going to challenge you to learn how to put a reminder in your phone. And then I'm going to invite you into me sharing that with you for real, because I wouldn't remember anything if this thing didn't buzz and tell me I'm supposed to be somewhere. Can I get an amen, Jill Curcuruto? So that's the truth. And his response was like, I didn't expect that. I expect, like, he needs me. I'm supposed to be there for him. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it. Like, this whole thing, no one will show up if I have to invite them all. I refuse to do that. And maybe that's wrong. Please pray with me afterwards and talk to me. I'm serious. Like, if that's wrong, if you feel convicted, I just feel like I don't want to set up a standard that I cannot. We get to 5 people, and I'm like, oh, I forgot to invite that one person. Ridiculous. So the Spirit of God will give you the reminder when you're listening. That's what I believe, right? And if they don't show up, they're not hearing from the Spirit, or they're being sent somewhere else. Amen to that. I'm okay with that. But those are just some everyday stories of what it looks like to kind of figure this out. I'm learning forward. I'm messing up. I'm trying to figure it out. And I kind of come back to this and say, what would it look like to be in our community as we walk this out, and then try to recalibrate it from there. So I'm going to end there.